Hi guys, Ronnie here and welcome to the workshop. Today, as you may have guessed, I'm going to talk about indoor training, which is a very contemporary topic now in the middle of winter and all kinds of lockdowns. So basically I wanted to compile this video from all the questions that I usually get because I'm a big fan of indoor riding, particularly now that we have such great options to ride on and such a great kit to use. So it's no longer, I think, a taboo topic that should be avoided at all costs. So my take on this, and the first thing I wanted to say is that if you don't live in a tropical climate and you want to take your training seriously and your preparation, perhaps you're working with a coach and you need to adhere to the training plan, then whatever you do during the year, there will be times, and I can guarantee you that, where you will not be able to train outside like you wanted to. And to keep that consistency and to stick to your plan, an indoor training setup obviously is a great option because it's always available, the conditions are always acceptable. So that's the first thing. Doesn't matter how much you think you don't need one. As I said, if you're serious about your training, there will be a time when you will. Then the second thing is, if you decide to go for one, you need to plan ahead, because nowadays there's quite a problem with availability of trainers and accessories. So my advice would be to think ahead, because you know where you live, you know there will always be a next winter, so you will always need to prepare for it. And indoor trainers and these accessories are not something that gets redundant very quickly, unlike with bike parts or frames. These change every couple of years, sometimes very vast changes, but the trainers, this is the fifth generation of the Wahoo, but it's essentially the same. If you had the first one, you can still use it with all the current software, so it's more of an investment. And if you look at the used market now, it also doesn't depreciate that much. In fact, now that the new units are almost impossible to get, there are people selling their used products for the prices of new ones. So that just proves that point. And again, I will say that if you want to take your training seriously, you need a serious setup where you will have no limitations in completing your training, whatever that may be. So to sum it up, if you want to train hard or properly over the winter, then you need to know that in August and act accordingly, because otherwise you might not be able to do that. Okay, so with that out of the way, now for the training tips themselves. So first, about the equipment, I would say if you have the option, always go for direct drive. There are many smart trainers out there that are still wheel on, but as I said, it's an investment. So if you want to take your training properly, you need direct drive. Why? Unless your FTP is 80 watts, then there will be times when there will be serious limitations on what kind of training can you do with a wheel-on trainer. Now, if you're on a budget, it's always better to have a power meter on your bike and have a dumb direct drive trainer than any other combination, because that way you can still have your power numbers outside and you will not have the limitations that a smart wheel-on trainer would have. So that's the first thing regarding equipment. The second thing is a fan. Having proper cooling and ventilation, the lack of proper cooling and ventilation is one of the very common factors in terms of indoor cycling performance and just the general ability to complete your trainings. What I use is a Wahoo headwind fan. It's quite expensive, but in my experience, it's worth its weight in gold because it's smart. So it controls the airspeed based on your heart rate, which is a very logical way to do that. It doesn't take up much space, it's not too loud, and it's very effective in the way that the area of the airflow that it generates, very similar to riding a bike. So I had no problem doing 4 or 5 hour rides and still that without overheating and in relative comfort. So it's definitely a product I can recommend. There are all kinds of these big fans, you know, for industrial use, etc., that some people use, but they just blow air, you know, in no particular way all over the room without having a real cooling effect. And unlike some people think, it's a Wahoo product, but it's not in any way tied to a Wahoo trainer. So yeah, all you need is a heart rate strap with Bluetooth and you're good to go. Then secondly, regarding the choice of training that you do indoors, what I tend to do in the last couple of weeks is that I took my hard interval sessions, which would be much harder indoors, and I took them outside when it was possible, which enables you to make a high quality workout. But then, for example, I took my indoor training sessions indoors, my endurance sessions indoors, because I was too cold to stay outside for that long. And you know, it's always better that you know that you have certain conditions that you can be sure to complete the ride in, even if it's 3, 4, 5 hours. When if you go outside, you know, it can get dark on you, you can get a puncture, you can get too cold, you can get wet, so it's never certain. Okay, a couple more thoughts about choosing your workouts and pros and cons, indoors versus outdoors. For some people, riding indoors can be very monotonous, even if you choose a training program like Zwift, etc. To combat that, my advice against this is, well, if it's relatively nice outdoors and you have a workout that suits riding outdoors, then by all means do that whenever possible. So you have some kind of balance between riding in and out, 60-40 for example. That's what I try to do. This way none of those two get really in your head, and it makes the whole process much more bearable. The second thing, bike choice. As you can see, what I have on my trainer is my time trial bike. The reason for that is this is a bike that people don't normally ride in poor conditions, but having it permanently, well, throughout the winter months, installed on a trainer, again gives you a good balance of riding both your time trial and road bike, because this is not a very pleasant bike to ride when it's cold, and it's not a problem indoors, whereas you still have your regular road bike for when it's not so bad out there. And as an addition, it makes you better at holding your position and putting the power down, which I think is also one of the reasons why I'm relatively good at time trialing. Another useful factor of indoor training is the fact that you get permanent heat exposure, which means that you don't lose the heat adaptation that you gain over the winter. So if the weather changes suddenly in the spring, you are pretty well prepared, and it's a big advantage if you're doing an event in the middle of January somewhere out in Dubai, for example, going from the winter. So in that case you still have a competitive advantage there. Next up, hydration and nutrition. Now, hydration will be probably obvious. You're in a hot environment, you're sweating a lot, so you need to replenish more often. That's a given. But what people don't tend to focus on when riding indoors is that you still need to back up your carbohydrate sources even when you're riding indoors, if you're doing longer rides, of course. And what people fail to recognize is that since you're in a hot environment again, you're actually burning more calories than you would otherwise in the cold, contrary to popular belief. So you need to be on top of your gels and energy chews. And another good thing is that indoors you can easily use bars because you're stationary. You don't need to take care of the handling of your bike, so eating these is not a problem so much. And last but not least, I want to talk about clothing. Now, until recently, companies didn't really make indoor specific clothing, but now they do, and I've been lucky enough to have them provided by my long-term partner Nopins. This is their Sub-Zero suit. It's also available as separate bib shorts and a jersey. Why is this great? Again, these are details that contribute to your overall comfort when training indoors on your bike. It's just very similar to a regular road racing suit, except it's made throughout from this breathable mesh material, which is kind of obvious, like all hot weather gear. Also, it doesn't have sleeves for even more cooling. But the real party trick with this one is the gel insert kit. So these are little elastic inserts that you can put in your freezer and then apply them to specific pockets on the suit itself to provide additional cooling. I use this for my FTP test, for example. It really helps, but the best use case for these is probably Zwift racing or any kind of indoor racing. But unfortunately, I'm a poor performer when it's really hot outside during the summer, so I'm really looking forward to try these out with my regular time trial suits, just to give me a bit of an advantage. In that regard, there are also some other clever details that they do. For example, these sweatbands that you put on a forearm. It's quite effective and very cost effective too. Yeah, looks something like this. Particularly in the tantra position, it enables you just a quick wipe to keep yourself comfortable. And yeah, a towel, also a must-have apart from a fan. This is really just to protect your environment and your bike more specifically, so you don't have all that corrosive sweat running down through it. That's more about your bike's health. And then another detail that really is just cherry picking, but it's the last 1% probably. Summer specific shoes, some companies make them now, and they're also really nice and breathable, helps with comfort over long indoor rides. Okay, so I think that pretty much is it, all tips that I have for you from my own experience regarding indoor training. If you want to know more about the equipment that I use and work on for my customers, then don't forget to tune into the channel later on and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.